Hey guys, Hanor here. Alright, in this episode, I'm going to be reviewing the Meteor F3, not the same Meteor, the Meteor F3, just make sure that's out there, and also covering some tactics with it as well. Now, before I move on into the review points of the strengths and weaknesses of the aircraft, as usual, I plan to cover about the history of the aircraft a little bit here. The Gloucester Meteor was the first Allied production jet to actually enter into service, and it entered in World War II. It entered in 3 months after the introduction of the 262 jet fighter by the German Air Force. Initially, its role was kept to hunting down B-1s over in Britain, and it was forbidden to actually go into German occupied territory because they were afraid of the Germans actually capturing their jet technology. However, in January 1945, they began to move the Meteors over into Europe, moving them closer and closer towards Germany as the lines would get pushed up through time. However, they still had the same restriction that they were not allowed to actually go directly into German occupied territories. During this time frame, they were used for ground strike missions, as well as to help make plans for jet attacks against bomber formations. Now, that effort alone actually did a very big payday for the Allies during the war, but outside of that, the Gloucester Meteor didn't really have a humongous presence during the war. Now, before I move on to strengths and weaknesses, I also want to cover a fact about the Meteor compared to the 262 counterpart. Now, their jet engines, they both have jet engines. However, the 262s have an actual flow design engine, and the F3 Meteors have a hemispherical flow. And the thing about the hemispherical flow is they actually generate more thrust, which is why the Meteor itself is a very fast accelerator. With this being said, I'm going to move into the strengths and weaknesses of this aircraft. Now, for the learning curve, the entry-level jets, the Meteor actually has the fastest acceleration, and the Sea Meteor is extremely even faster accelerating than the F3. The 4 nose-mounted 20mm also make a very nice, powerful addition to its strengths as well. Now, there are aircraft that have better armaments. However, this makes this thing pretty deadly, or extremely deadly to most aircraft and head-ons. And the last major strength that the Meteor has is that it can pretty much out-turn any other jet that exists. However, its turn rate is also, a fault in its own way. When you're first starting out in the Meteor, before you have your modules fully unlocked for the aircraft, you can easily rip your wings, and even after you get all your modules unlocked, you can find wing rips pretty easy to do in turns. And I'll cover about how to counter that in a little bit. And another issue with when you turn is the fact that you bleed a lot of energy. There's a lot of lift value on these wings because they're massive. I mean, basically, this is the jet version of a Spitfire. So anytime that you are entering a turn, you're generating a lot of drag that slows your plane down really suddenly, and you bleed off your energy quickly. So that leads to the final drawback of the F3, is that its energy retention is not very good. Now combine that though with its high acceleration, actually makes the jet still very comfortable. In fact, most pilots that fly the Meteors tend to be very comfortable with them compared to the other jets of the other nations that are entry-level jets. So first off, I want to cover about tactically what you're going to be coming up against as far as tactics goes. Now, most of the time you're going to find yourself fighting against props, as well as P-80s, F-80s, and 262s, 162s, and the Kai 200s. Now, keep in mind that this aircraft, because of its acceleration, it climbs really well, so you should always start out getting a very high altitude in this aircraft. Now, whenever you're fighting against props, whatever you do, do not turn fight props. You know, this is pretty much the golden rule for any jet player. Also, be particularly minded to those that maintain energy super well, such as the F80Cs, the 262s, and even a P80 that's managed to actually get to enough altitude to become a dangerous threat. Now, a lot of times these energy aircraft, if they're being played correctly, they're going to try to boom zoom you, but they're not going to try to turn fight you. So don't waste your time trying to turn fight with them, unless you catch them trying to actually initiate the turn, and then in that case, exploit their weakness. Now, if they were not trying to initiate a turn and it's a head-on, you know, after you do your pass-through and you pass from the merge, make sure that you continue and start climbing, trying to get a more dominant position for future attack. Now, if you have a lot of airspeed, you can actually couple this with an Emelon turn, putting you even higher and able to regain your energy as you come back towards the opponent. And if you're at low energy, you could always do a split S, which will help keep your energy high. Now, one of the most threatening aircraft that you're probably going to face will be MiG-9s. And I did forget to mention that earlier, but you know, that's another common entry-level jet that you will be coming across. Now, they retain really high energy, and they have very nice firepower, and they can actually climb pretty decently compared to most other entry-level aircraft. So they can get themselves in a pretty decent advantage point during the fight. In the cases that you're fighting MiG-9s, you're going to want to treat them just like the F-80s and the 262s as well. Very much, you don't want to turn unless they're going to turn. You know, you got to keep your energy very high. The reason why I don't have very much MiG-9 footage on here is because two reasons. The Korean map's really massive, and a lot of the times my team is comprised of mostly sea meteors, and all the footage I tried to get of that. And unfortunately, the F3 Meteor is so much slower than the sea meteors, so by the time that I would get involved in the action, the enemy team would either be dead or I would be the only one left versus the entire enemy team. Lastly, concern-wise, is going to be the Kai 200 and the 162s. Now, 162s are not so much of an issue. They can sprint a little bit faster than you momentarily. However, most of the time, anytime that they turn, they drain their energy pretty quickly, and you can catch up to them. So just be aware that they're going to try to do boom zoom strikes on you. The Kai 200s though are extremely faster than you. However, their fuel time is very lacking. So initially, when you first spot these aircraft, I recommend, if you are at a disadvantage, to go ahead and run, get to maximum speed, and keep them moving, and move them towards your friendly allies. If you are already in an advantage with them, even though you have really nice frontal forward firepower, I recommend only making a brief head-on. Don't continue it through, because their slow 30s will catch you, because your plane's pretty big, and even if you try to pull out of it too late, you give so much surface area, they're almost guaranteed to hit you with those 30s. So make a brief engagement and then get out of there quickly, out of the head-on, and then re-engage or run it through, depending on, you know, their position of energy towards yours. Alright, now I want to move back to what I was discussing about earlier about the wing rips. Now, one of the big things about wing ripping is that, especially when you start off without the modules, it's really easy to rip your wings. But even with the updated modules, you can still rip your wings. Now, there's 3 ways to counter this. Now, the first way I recommend to do this is to actually move the mouse circle only so far, you know, a couple inches away from the pipper at a time whenever you're turning. And as your pipper starts to get close to the circle, move it some more, and keep moving it this way. This will actually provide the aircraft almost the maximum turn that it can pull off, but it will also guarantee that it won't pull enough of a turn to where it'll just rip your wings off. Now there's another way you can do this, and you can use this to combine that. Now I call this method blackout turning for the purpose of the game. What you do is you initiate a turn, a slow turn, using the previous method that I talked about, and once the edges of your screen start to go dark from the blackout, then you can start initiating a full turn by pulling your mouse the rest of the way that you want it to go. And the reason why I call this a blackout turn, because as your pilot starts to black out, he no longer can pull past, a certain threshold of the blackout. So in essence, your pilot is kind of G-locking himself, but without getting to the point of actually physically passing out. And so you'll get the maximum turn you can get, and it'll never exceed the point of ripping the wings. I recommend actually going into a few test flights to get it down though, because at the very initial, you can't do it just the second you see it darken. You gotta wait till your guy looks like he's blacking out. Alright, just want to make sure that's clear. I recommend for your first few times doing it, do it in a test flight. But you can do it with any aircraft, and it's just really nice. Once you get the feel for it, it's really easy and comfortable to do. Now the third method, and you'll see a lot of people explain this to people in chat, is to do air brake turns. And this is a very good maneuver or method to do this, especially if you're at high speed. However, if you're not at high speeds, or extremely high speeds, I should say, at maximum speeds, and even then, I try to say stay a little bit clear of that. The reason why is because whenever you hit the air brake, you are going to slow down dramatically. The air brakes are very nice on the F3 Meteor. You start slowing down really, really dramatically, which is a lot of energy lost. And then when you combine that with a turn, because it already bleeds a lot of energy in a turn, you've lost a tremendous amount of energy. If you combine that plus us going up against an aircraft that retains energy very well, and they notice this, they can very well exploit it, and that can quickly lead to your defeat. And the only other time that I would say go for the air brakes whenever you're turning is if you're in a dive. Okay, so the strength and weakness of this aircraft for its class of an initial jet fighter is that it's very fast accelerating, it climbs really well, it has very nice frontal firepower, and it can turn really good. However, it can easily rip its wings, and its energy is easy to lose in these turns. So most of the time, most pilots are very comfortable with this jet for a starting jet because it's normally more suited to their play style. And so it's easier, I think, to get used to this jet versus other nations' initial jet fighters. Also, if you do rip your wings, please don't be disgruntled about it. Even I have continuously, on the occasion, still ripped my wing in the Meteor. Alright guys, I hope you guys enjoyed this video. I hope it's helped you out. And if you did enjoy this video, give me the big thumbs up, and also subscribe for future content to come. Alright guys, good hunting out there. Performance comparably between the P80A in-game and the F80C is drastically lower. To me it feels as though they have taken the J31 engine, the 1,300 pounds of thrust engine for this aircraft, and that just is terrible.